Hey everybody, it's MusicMan82 here, and I'm coming to you tonight with an introduction to a trip that I did back in 2012. I'm going to be altering my format from what I've done the first month or so of my channel, and instead of including the discussion about the trip in the video that has all of the pictures and stuff, I'm going to be talking about it in my beer analysis video. So I'll be posting them both on Sundays as well. So this will be the first one that follows that pattern. So today I am drinking the Imperial Black IPA from Hub Brewery out in Oregon. And this one comes in at 7.8% alcohol. And it's I would say this is one of the best black IPAs I've ever had. Black IPAs are a really interesting beer for me. I'm an IPA fan. If you watch the channel, you know that. Hops are my favorite flavor in the world. It seems like black IPAs tend to do too many things with malt, and then the hops get muted a bit. And so I've tended to not enjoy black IPAs that much. This one, however, strikes a really good balance between malt character and the hops. And there are both caramel and chocolate malts that are used in this, and it's a very, I would say the body is definitely there. It's one of those beers that doesn't come across as a 7.8%. It's pretty easy drinking. But the thing that I love about it is that the hops shine through the entire palate. It's really a good beer. I had avoided getting this one for a while. I had seen it up at City Vineyard in Billings for a while, and I was like, not sure I want to, buy that one. And then my friend Mike bought a pack of it, and was nice enough to give me a couple, and I was like, wow, that's a really good black IPA. So one of the interesting things about black IPAs is that I had a friend once who's really, really knowledgeable about beer, and he told me that if you do a blind taste test with IPA, black IPA versus a regular IPA, if you do a blind taste test, you shouldn't be able to tell the difference between the two if judging in competition. And my question to that was, well, why the heck do you do a black IPA? Why not just do a regular malt profile for it? So to me, it doesn't bother me that there's some extra flavor from the darker malts in this. To me, it almost has a little bit of a roasted flavor and a little bit of smoke on it. It's a really good beer. So anyway, if you ever have a chance sample this beer, it's a good one. So the trip I'm talking about in this video is one that I took in 2012. I was in really good shape back then, and I did this trip in a really short period of time. It was only 2.5 days. If I went back and tried to do that now, I'd probably die because I'm not in as good a shape as I was 8 years ago. But it was a really fun trip for me because for a few reasons. It was the first time I ever got to go into Pinedale, Wyoming, and then go up to Elkhart Park and get into the Wind Rivers via that trailhead. And it's one of the most beautiful places in the world. I found that just getting to go in there and see, I didn't actually go all the way into Titcomb Basin, but just seeing the lakes from Fremont Peak, which I climbed during the trip, and seeing Indian Basin, it was a magical experience for me, and it definitely got me hooked on that area. It was I think it was only my third trip in the winds. I did one in 2009 with my friend Bob through the north side of the winds up near Du Bois, and then I did the Gannet Peak trip, which you can see in a video that I've already posted. And so I'd never gone in anywhere else in the winds, and everyone always said, Titcomb Basin is beautiful, you got to go see it. And So my primary objective in this trip was to climb Fremont Peak, and I had a very limited window in which to do it. And so I did it in a really quick trip. I left early in the morning, probably 4 a.m. Went through Yellowstone Park, south of Jackson, and then booked it over to Pinedale. And I think I hit the trailhead somewhere around 11:30 or 12. You know, it's been 8 years ago, almost 9 years ago. I guess since now it's 2021. And I remember thinking, okay, it's noon. I want to make it to Island Lake. And Island Lake is a good 13-ish miles into that trek. And I did it with a full pack. I got there fairly late. It was almost 8 o'clock, I think, when I made it to camp. And there weren't a lot of good campsites left. And I kind of just took a spot across to the east side of the trail from where Island Lake is. All the good spots so you can see tent after tent. And it's a super busy area. If you've ever been in there, you'll know that it's probably the most heavily trafficked area for backpackers in all of Wyoming. And so I just kind of set up my tent. It wasn't a great camp spot. I remember setting it up on a bunch of the big tufts of grass and just tried to find a spot to sleep that wasn't super uncomfortable. It was an interesting hike in. The first day I had never been to Photographer's Point before. And so having been there many times after that, I know that the view from there is spectacular. However, in 2012, when I did this peak, there were a lot of forest fires out west, and the views were pretty muted because of all of this forest fire smoke. And so the pictures that you're going to see in this video, I've had to do a little bit of photoshopping to get some of what I could see. My camera kept overexposing and making the light way too much. And so bear with me through those photos. I almost didn't put a video about this trip because it was just some of the photos I was not impressed with. But after working with them for a little bit, I figured I could make it happen. So soon after I reached Photographer's Point and headed on the trail east towards Eklund Lake, I came around a corner and there was a black bear just sitting right in the middle of the trail. And he was sitting in a really cute way. He was like sitting on his rear end with his legs out in front of him, and he was doing something with his paws in front of his face. And he saw me and freaked out and ran across the trail. And you never know when you're going to see a bear. And one of the very few black bears I've ever seen in my entire hiking career. I've seen way more grizzlies, having done a lot of my hiking in the Ozorka Range. And then, so the first night I made it all the way to Island Lake, and then I got up super early, and the route up Fremont goes a little bit more on the trail, and then there's a sign that takes you up into Indian Basin. And then once you top out in Indian Basin, rather than continuing the trail which crosses the creek, you kind of keep on the left side and just walk along until you reach a saddle that's just below Fremont Peak. And it's a long off-trail section, but it's not that difficult. You just keep going, kind of ascending through it. It's a really interesting spot because you're at 12,000 feet, and I got to the saddle and there was full 4 bars LTE service. I caught up on my Scrabble games and other things that I was playing on my phone before I headed up the peak. And the route up Fremont Peak, so note about Fremont, it's the 3rd highest peak in Wyoming, and it's the highest at 13,804. The Grand Teton's second at 13,770, and then Fremont comes in just 25 feet behind that at 13,745. And it's an amazing mountain. It was first climbed by Fremont in 1842, and at the time, many explorers, including Fremont, I believe, thought it was the highest peak in the Rockies. It stands out as this just amazing block of rock that sits there in the middle of the Wind River Range. Gannett Peak, which is higher by, not, 50 some feet, doesn't really stand out because it's a little more hidden by the peaks around it. And so when you get up on top of Fremont, you could easily look across the Gannett, which is still several miles north of there, and be like, yeah, I'm higher than that. And you'll see in one of the pictures north to Gannett Peak that, it's, you can't really tell a difference of less than 60 feet over several miles. Gannett, it has this beautiful glacier on the east and northeast side. Fremont is the southernmost peak along a ridge which includes Sacagawea and Mount Helen, which are also 13ers and some of the more difficult 13ers in Wyoming. But there's this amazing glacier that sits below them that someday I want to just climb up to just to go walk on, because I think it would be an amazing experience. So the route up Fremont, in spite of being a really huge peak, is only class 3. You don't really have to do anything special to climb it other than a little bit of use of hands, navigating a few sections to get up, and it's a really fun summit. When you kind of get close to the top, you kind of need to veer a little bit towards the left, and the summit is actually quite exposed. If it's a windy day, you don't want to stand on top of it because you could risk a 1,000-foot plus fall off to the east, and then you'd see the glacier up close quite quickly. So it's kind of a fun summit just to see. There's a big white PVC pipe summit register that you can sign. It's very frequently climbed. It's probably one of the more popular peaks in the Wind River Range. I think there are very few days during the summer that at least someone doesn't climb it. I met a couple other people on the way down that were headed up, including one guy. I actually made it off the peak down to the saddle, and he was headed up fairly late in the day, but the weather was looking great. And he was just super excited to get to the top and smoke some weed. I was like, go for it, man, have fun. So I made it to the back to camp probably around 4 o'clock, maybe a little later. Made some dinner, but then packed up camp, and then I headed out to Hobbs Lake because I needed to get out early the third day, and then I made it out the next morning pretty early. I think I left fairly early, and I was back home probably mid-afternoon on the third day. So the whole trip took me less than 60 hours. If I were doing it now, it would take more than that. But the peak itself is just one of the most beautiful summit views you'll ever get. And like I said before, there was smoke on this particular trip. My wife and I did it in 2019 with clearer views, and I'll post that trip at a later date. The scariest thing for me actually was that most of the smoke was coming from the west. And so because there was that thick layer of gray smoke, I couldn't tell what the weather was doing. So as you're headed up to 13,000 feet, it's not the place you want to be if a thunderstorm is coming in. And so because of the thick gray smoke, you couldn't see if a storm was coming up. And luckily none did that day, but I could see how it would be a little bit tricky. If one did, you wouldn't have a lot of time to try and book it back down to safety. So yeah, Fremont Peak is a wonderful, wonderful place to be in Wyoming. I think round trip is just over 30 miles, and it's honestly one of the more accessible summits. A lot of the Wind River peaks that are over 13,000 feet are class 4 or class 5. There are a few that aren't, but this one in particular is it's super easy. You don't have to take climbing shoes, you don't have to take ropes, you don't have to take axes. You just scramble up the side of it. So really cool peak. So hopefully you enjoy that video. I'll be including a link for it at the end of this one. If you enjoy the channel, hit the like button, and I would love it if you could also subscribe, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and we'll see you around. Cheers.